seemed to level out around the area. I mean, there was a presence of wolves and Bigfoot, yes. However, it was as if they had peace. I came to believe and understand that this was due to us partnering with God to subdue the territory. Then things started to change again when someone bought the property across the road from me and began to clear the land. I remember it like yesterday. These crews came out with construction equipment, bulldozers, to clear the land, and they started working fast. In days, they had cleared the land, and then they started leveling it. The foreman on the job, Eric, came over and knocked on the door, and he was a gentleman. He said, "Sir, I know over the next few months there will be a lot of traffic in this area, and I want you to know that if for any reason there is damage done to your property, we are fully insured. We plan to put a modular house here, and eventually we will be bringing out a crane to set it on its foundation. I will coordinate with you when that day comes. I just wanted to introduce myself." I was impressed by him, and he went on to tell me that he had plans to develop in this area 5 more houses. In that moment, I thought to tell him that was a bad idea, but I didn't want to sound crazy. However, I did tell him, "Listen, Eric, I would not sink too much money into this land all at once. Take it slow and let things come to you. These are tough lands, and I hate to see you have problems." This look came across his face, and I think he took it more as a threat than a warning. However, I'm not sure how you warn someone about monsters and demons. You know, that is a conversation that has to start after they come to understand what is in these woods. It didn't take long for things to escalate, not long at all. About 2 weeks in, they left their equipment out there, and in the middle of the night, it sounded like a freaking car accident was happening. I looked out the front window and you could see one of those bulldozers rolling like a freaking tumbleweed across that cleared land. And what made it worse was the trailer that they used to bring it to the construction site. The wheels were laying in the middle of the road, and I knew in that moment that this construction was going to be a major problem. The following morning at 8 a.m., there was a knock at the door. It was not Eric, it was one of his guys, and he was pissed. I understood, and he was asking what happened, and I told him I did not know. He accused me of doing something, and in that moment, I didn't know what to say. "How do you explain what happened?" I just told him, "I'm sorry, but I had nothing to do with it." An hour later, Eric knocks on the door, and he is more diplomatic about it. He says, "Sir, do you have any clue who was here and did this?" I say, "Eric, it was not a person that did that. Who do you know that can do something like that? Rip the wheels off the trailer." The look on his face was strange as he grappled with what was being said. He looked at me with this blank look and said, "I don't understand?" I tell him, "I know you don't." I tell Eric, "I know you don't understand, but just don't leave equipment here overnight. It's not a good idea." He is just standing there trying to comprehend what I'm saying, and then he turns and walks away without a word. That entire day was spent salvaging the trailer and getting the bulldozer flipped over. The next day I wake up and see trees and logs on the cleared lot, roots and all. So I walk out there and look, and I want to be clear with you. These trees and logs are not from the immediate area. They are thrown all around, some of them driven into the ground. Imagine seeing a 15-foot log driven into the ground like a pile driver was used. I'm standing there in amazement when Eric pulls up, gets out of the truck, and says, "What the freak is going on?" Listen, I have seen something since I lived here, but this was crazy. There are 3 of these that made a triangle. Now Eric is mad, I mean pissed, but I don't know what to tell him. He just stands there and looks silently. So I go back to the house, and they spend that day removing all the logs from the plot of land. That evening, he knocks on the door and asks if we can talk. I say sure, and he comes inside and starts to ask questions. I'm doing my best to work him into understanding the bad decision he made to buy the property when my son comes into the room. He is listening, and you know how kids are. He says, "The things in the woods are not going to let you build on that land. They don't know you." Then he walks off. The look on Eric's face is even more crazy than before. He says, "What is he talking about?" And I start to tell him our story, the same story you have heard. I get about 10 minutes in, and he looks at me like I'm crazy and says this makes no sense. He excuses himself and leaves, and then makes a huge mistake. 2 days later, he comes out with a witch. He knocks on the door and tells me that he has a solution to the problem, and when I looked at her, immediately I knew she was a witch. As he is talking, I tell him, "Listen, don't give that witch dominion over your land. You have dominion, don't hand it over." She looks at me with this look of anger, and I tell her, "You know exactly what I'm talking about." She says, "That is his choice." I warn him again. I say, "Eric, you don't know me or anything about this place, neither does she." As I'm talking, she starts to back away, looking like she is scared, and she keeps going back and back until she is in the road. I say, "Eric, you are making a mistake. I can explain to you what needs to be done, but this is a mistake." He does not listen, so I close the door and watch through the window as they cross the street, and she sprinkles some stuff all around the property. 3 days pass and there is nothing. They are not digging a foundation and preparing to lay the slab. You know how you lay the wood frame, and rebar for the foundation, right? They do all of that, and that night it rains. At 4 a.m., it sounds like World War VII outside. It wakes my entire house up and we look outside, but it's dark over there, but it sounds like stuff hitting the trees. This goes on for about 30 minutes, and when the sun comes up, the rebar has been ripped out and is up in the tops of trees, and there are logs driven into the ground right where the foundation was. I already know this dude is going to freak out. When he gets there, I tell my wife if he knocks not to answer the door. Sure enough, he knocks, and we ignore it. He had made his decision, and it was his choice. Later that day, the witch shows up again, and the window is open, and I hear them talking, and she tells Eric that I'm a sorcerer. "Stop right here and let me explain something to you, those who are children of darkness. Lying is a part of their religion. They lie boldly even when lying makes no sense." I'm listening, and I walk outside and call for Eric, and I say, "Eric, I want you to listen to me. I heard what this woman has told you, and it is a lie. I warned you, but let me ask you a question. Do you believe in Jesus? Do you go to church?" He says, "Yes." I ask him, "Then why did you turn to a witch instead of God?" And he looks at me like I'm crazy. He had no answer. Then I turn to her and say, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus Christ." She looks at me and turns and walks away. Over the next month, Eric and this woman came back and forth, and every time she came, it got worse. I would just ignore Eric and his issues, and when I prayed, God said he will come when he figures out what is going on. Well, I don't know if it was his idea or her idea, but Eric decided to park his truck in the middle of the lot and stay there overnight. I remember coming home and seeing him sitting there as the sun went down and thinking, "Dude, you are in for a rude awakening." Sure enough, it happened, but this time it started early, 9 p.m. I'm just getting out of the shower and I hear what sounds like another car accident. I didn't even get a chance to get to the bedroom before he was beating on the front door, and when I opened it, I knew Eric now understood what was going on. He tries to barge his way into my house, and I stop him, putting my foot behind the door. "Stop right here and let me teach you something. Anyone who has come into agreement with a witch, you should never come into agreement with them if you are Christian. You open yourself to their consequences, and you darn sure don't let them in your house." So I go outside. He is in full panic, and when I look over, his Ford truck is flipped over on its side. Taking a closer look at him, he is bleeding from the back of his head. Again, he insists that I let him in, and I say no, I will take him to the hospital, but he isn't coming into my house. So we get in my truck, and I ride him over to the hospital, and he is in a daze. I get him to the emergency room and leave him. His truck sits there for 2 days before he returns and has it flipped back over. Then he comes to talk and tell me what he saw. He said he was sitting in the truck and he thought he saw something move in the trees. So he turned on the headlight, and when the tree line lit up, it was nothing but golden Aishin in the woods. Then he says, "You know how you see something moving out of the corner of your eyes?" I say yes. He says, "That's how fast it happened." There was motion out of the corner of his eyes, and the next thing he knew, his truck was flipped on its side and being pushed sideways and down into the earth. Then he asks the million-dollar question, "What is going on out here, and what do I do?" Over the next few days, I explained to Eric what he has gotten himself into, and at first I thought he understood. But you know what they say? A hard head makes a soft behind. Because he comes back out with the witch again. Now, mind you, it has been over 2 months, and all he has successfully done is clear the land. Everything else is sabotaged. When I see the two of them, I go inside and watch TV. I never thought that what happened next could happen. It was crazy. So, you will understand, about a mile up the road is where the creek crosses over. It runs behind Gordon's house. There is a little bridge over the road, so that means the creek is a mile away from this man's land. Well, I wake up and the whole thing is flooded, underwater, and I'm like, this is new. I got to go see this. So, I head to the bridge where the creek is and listen. The water that was flowing through the creek, if you stand on the bridge and look to the left, it flows for about 45 yards and then it drops into this hole in the ground and dries up. Somehow, these things had diverted the water underground and to Eric's property, and I'm standing there like, okay, this is wild. When I'm walking in the woods next to the creek, it's dry, so I go back to try and find where the water is coming from on his land, and I can't get back in there. I knew this was going to be it for Eric. This was too much for me, but again, hard heads make sorry behinds.